Hey guys, Zack Mars here, and this is my review of Trollhunters Tales of Arcadia. Okay, so this episode, Mistrial and Error, is essentially exactly that. We see Jim's trial in this episode, and it does not go well. But also, I do want to mention something interesting about this episode, in that normally a lot of these are like named after puns, and are also based on different shows and other things that the creators reference. This one is somewhat unique in that while it is a pun, it is also, a reference to the fact that, there's an actual show in the universe of Trollhunters that this episode is named after, and I find that kind of neat. But in case the episode does open up with Jim being brought before the tribunal, who are of course reading him the charges about all of the things he's done, about how he's snuck into the Darklands like Gunmar out, and ultimately has doomed all of Trollkind for his reckless actions, and for that he's being put on trial. And of course, Claire is insistent that he should not do this, pointing out that obviously Jim doesn't need to prove anything. But of course, Jim tells everybody that he kind of has to do this, even though Blinky doesn't fully understand why he would continue to do this. But it's at this point where Jim, and this is something I kind of glossed over a little bit in my previous review, but Jim goes on to explain how he sort of met Merlin in a dream of sorts, and told him that he needs to fight. So he's planning to fight, and however he can. And of course, Blinky thinks he's nuts. Like, Blinky openly explains that he thinks that Jim has finally lost it, and ultimately Jim declares that Blinky, that is so much for Blinky representing him. And it's at this point where we find out that actually Blinky is that the troll hunter cannot be represented by Blinky at all. As we find out, there's a lot. They explain a lot of troll law in this episode, as you might expect. But essentially, they explain that Jim isn't able to be represented by Blinky because he has to be represented by someone from his tribe, which in this case would be another human. So Claire and Toby, and of course they do try to represent. Jim initially wants Claire to represent him because she's smart, she can do it. He thinks she would be able to do it really well. But she explains that she doesn't know the first thing about law or anything else. At which point, Toby starts expositing all sorts of knowledge in terms about courtroom proceedings, and of course when Blinky wonders where he pulled out all of those fantastical terms about that you would use in a courtroom, he explains that he has watched every single episode of Mistrial and Error with his Nana, which means that it doesn't really constitute real legal knowledge. He does at the very least know what's supposed to go on in a courtroom. So he does understand the general gist of it. At which point the tribunal asks everybody if they've made a decision about who they want to represent Jim, and Jim ultimately picks Toby, even though Toby openly objects, pointing out that he doesn't know the first thing about troll law. But of course, kind of anticipating this, it's at this point where Ursurna has the entire troll tribunal break, so that Toby can prepare his case. And Toby, of course, is trying to lay it as long as possible because he's panicking. He doesn't know how troll law works. And of course, adding to that, there's like at least 10 books that Blinky hands him when they get back to his library to try and give him the idea that troll law is difficult, and he needs to fully understand how to explain that. And of course, Blinky of course insisted that Toby needs to learn troll law, while Claire is skeptical about whether or not any of this will actually work, pointing out that Toby is not an expert in troll law, and it would be kind of impossible for him to learn troll law in a matter of minutes. But Of course, they do point out that they're going to need to figure out a way to actually prove Jim's innocence, and do start racking their brains for how to figure it out. When they do remember that that the only thing real lead they have to maybe prove that Jim is innocent is that in between when his conversation with the possessed Droll, Gunmar brought up the fact that he knows what's going on in Troll Market, which of course causes Blinky to rack his brain a little bit, and they realize that that means there's most likely a spy. That if what Jim says is correct, that there's most likely a spy loose in Troll Market, and they do go off the logic of that, which is that if there is indeed a spy in Troll Market, then they would have just let Gunmar out anyway, and Jim was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So they of course but of course Blinky wonders if that argument could actually work, pointing out that the entire thing about Jim about Troll law is that they're not entirely sure if the tribunal will buy that, but pointing out that it's the only real lead they have, they decide to break things up, break it up into groups. Arg and Toby go to defend Jim, with Toby of course being counsel and Arg being co-counsel, while Claire and Blinky go off to go find a possible lead on the mole living in Troll Market, and whether or not they can find him somewhere. So they proceed to go do it exactly that. The first thing the tribunal establishes is that they see Arg, and insist that Arg can't represent Jim. But it's at this point where Toby walks out doing a funny accent, trying to mimic the lawyers that he's seen on TV, which of course Jim is confused as to why he's doing a voice, but when Toby realizes that the voice is a little too much, he then proceeds to just kind of go into normal court proceedings. So the first thing he does is try to kind of stall for time. I'm gonna break this up into a point A and point plot A and plot B, because they happen at the same time. But the first thing Toby does to stall for time is try to get Gato stricken from the Troll Tribunal, since obviously Gato has a bit of a history with Toby and the Trollhunter, and points out that he doesn't feel that he points out that there's a very good chance that Gato will not be impartial during the trial, which of course Gato takes offense to but can't really say anything about. But and of course at this point where they wonder if they're going to accuse, but if they're going to try and create a case for the argument. But it's this point where Toby reveals that no, actually, he just points his fingers at Jim and says that Jim is guilty as charged, which of course causes Jim to wonder what the hell Toby is doing, when as the quote unquote lawyer, he's supposed to get Jim off and try to acquit him of the charges. But no, Toby goes in the exact opposite approach, because as he explains, all of the episodes they've seen in Mistrial and Error start with a sort of twist, at which point he tries to goes through the list of things that Jim has obviously done. He went near the Darklands, Gunmar got out, all those other things, but also proceeds to point out that there's a lot of things that they don't know, and that's what he plans to find out. And this of course causes everybody to start throwing things at Toby when he tries to, after he does his opening argument. And and Toby tries to cower behind Arg, wondering what exactly it is they're doing, at which point Arg just responds, troll law. And of course, what we find out is that they throw stones to raise up their objections. Gonzo winds up landing a rock, even though he can't really throw all that well, because he's just an astral projection, but he succeeds, and Usurna gives him the floor, at which point Gato brings up all of his objections against Toby. But in any case, after all of the accusations are brought up, which we don't see because it cuts between the A plot and the B plot, the Toby then proceeds to call a witness to the stand to try and prove Jim's innocence and prove that he's a good person who is only trying to do what's best for everybody else. And so he calls Not Enrique, and Not Enrique takes offense to the fact that they just call him it and the witness, which he points out that he's not an it. So he has to repeatedly remind them that he's not an it. So he proceeds to explain how he knows Jim. That he is of course a changeling, but also explains that he's had a change of heart, And that ultimately he knows that Jim's a good kid because he went into the Darklands to rescue his familiar. And he explains that yes, he does see Jim as a hero. Which and of course when Toby tries to, have press him further, obviously this is where things go a little off the rails. But it's at this point where Not Enrique proceeds to explain tries to explain what happened after that. But and Toby tries to shut him up with it by feeding him a sock. But eventually Ursurna insists that Toby lets Not Enrique finish. At which point, Not Enrique proceeds to explain how Jim going into the Darklands did let Gunmar out, yes, but also explains how obviously he did do some good stuff in the process. Although the Tribunal openly doesn't like the fact that Not Enrique just admitted that Jim went into the Darklands and potentially let Gunmar out. So they of course take great offense to that. At which point Jim has effectively had enough at this point and proceeds to try and raise his own objections and about what he wants to say. But of course, we find out that according to troll law, they are not allowed. Jim is unfortunately not allowed to speak, but Vendel, who is on the tribunal, insists that Jim does speak his mind and speak from his heart. So Jim proceeds to do exactly that. He proceeds to explain that he obviously understands that he has made some mistakes. And openly admits that everyone has made mistakes at some point, and that he shouldn't be held accountable for, every little mistake that he makes. So, and he proceeds to go on to explain that yes, he did go into the Darklands, but it was to save someone, and given the opportunity, he would do it again. This, of course, causes the tribunal to immediately make up their mind about Jim, insisting that if he's going to potentially go back in the Darklands and cause more problems, that he obviously does know what he did was wrong. So, of course, they proceed to leave to deliberate, which, of course, Toby tries to explain that there's no deliberating, tries to tell them that the no deliberating to continue to go on, and he tries to get them to try and change their mind, but by that point they've already left. And meanwhile, Blinky and Claire go on a bit of an adventure to try and figure out the identity of the changeling. And of course they do meet with Rotguts, which they explain that if anybody knows who the changeling is in their midst, that Rotten Gut would obviously know who it is, but Blinky also goes on to explain that since this is confidential information about a client that they know, that obviously they would not know anything about they would obviously keep this to themselves and would not bring it up. And of course, they would take a lot of prying and coercing. At which point, Claire points out that they don't have enough time for that, and proceeds to insist that they, that they play good cop, bad cop. Claire, of course, opts to play bad cop, and of course immediately knocks on Rotten Gut's door, insisting that they tell them her everything. And Gil gets very, and in accordance with the whole good cop, bad cop idea, she gets very hostile with them very quickly before insisting that they better talk to her partner while she comes down. At which point it's revealed that Blinky also thought he was playing bad cop and pulls out a dwarf stone, which he insists he's going to use to blow them all up if they don't tell them what they want to know. And of course Claire is a little confused as to what he's doing, pointing out that pulling out the dwarf stone is not a good idea, and also thought that Blinky was supposed to be good cop, but Blinky also admits that he also thought Claire was going to be good cop and thought her performance felt a little off. But of course, ultimately, it does work, and Rotten Gut insists that they did know a guy named Crag, and they point out that Crag, he's bought out all of their gaggle tax, which they point out they don't fully understand why he did it, but they do admit that they're out of gaggle tax because of him. So realizing that they now have a lead, they point out that it's most likely that Crag used bought up all the gaggle tax to keep people from finding out that he's a changeling, and now realizing that he needs to figure out where this guy is, but also remembering that Blinky has a dwarf stone and doesn't know how to turn it off. What results in is a very comedic bit where he chucks it and it blows up somebody's stall. But now, kind of making up for the whole botched good cop, bad cop routine, Blinky sheepishly asked if they know where his address is. And of course, Rotten Gut give Blinky the address, and they meet his address to try and find some sort of incriminating clues. The first thing they find is a sock, which they point is hardly incriminating on itself, and they proceed to keep poking around until they finally find a chest full of gaggle tacks, which, of course, does kind of prove that this is in fact their man. But they also need to figure out that they won't help save Jim's skin on its own. So they point out that they're going to need to figure out how to, how to catch Craig in the act. And of course, point out that it's not like you just wait for him to come home. So, then they hear somebody coming, and realizing that's probably Craig, they hide behind a pillar and do just kind of wait for him to come in. And of course, we do meet Craig, and he's this big burly troll guy. So he kind of looks like it. So of course, the Blinky and Claire think they're going to have to fight him, but they have a better idea where they just throw a gaggle tack at him, and he catches it and turns into his human form. So and of course he's not a major important. And of course Craig is a little confused as to what they're doing in his house, but realizing he's been caught, he tries to escape. At which point Blinky cuts off his escape, and of course Craig is trying to get around Blinky, but Blinky then proceeds to pull out the Dwark Stone and insist that, and once again trying to do the whole bit he did with Rotten Gut, even though Claire points out why he would do that again, and pointing out that that's incredibly dangerous. But Blinky pointed out it worked the last time, it might work here. But of course, Blinky is insistent that he'll blow everybody up if Craig doesn't tell him what they want to know. And Craig tries to get around him and get the gaggle tech and get the Dwark Stone away from him. And he does ultimately succeed. He knocks it out of Blinky's hands and tries to grab it and shake it to turn it off. But by that point, it's about to blow, and he blows himself up in the process, causing his dust to go everywhere. And this, of course, makes Claire and Blinky realize that they've lost their only lead, and now they don't have any way to save Jim because they have with Craig goes their proof. But then realize that they're covered in Craig's dust, and realizing that the proof is on them, they immediately scoop up Craig's old box of gaggle tacks and try to go back to the tribunal with the evidence they found. And this, of course, causes. But of course, by the time they realize that they have evidence, they realize that it's ultimately too late, because they discover that unfortunately Toby did not do a very good job of stalling, and the tribunal has gone to deliberate. But of course, Blinky insists that they can't deliberate until they speak to Vendel. So they get to Vendel and proceed to explain to him what they found. And they explain now they found a box of gaggle tags in a troll's house, a guy named Craig, and they explain how Craig exploded due to a Dwark Stone, and all of his dust landed on top of them. Which of course initially Vendel is skeptical, wondering if it's another conspiracy they've wandered across, but of course, Blinky insists that it is no conspiracy, and proceeds to explain what it all means, about how because they found a changeling living in Troll Market, and they do point out that because of this they can absolutely make a case for Jim, pointing out that obviously if there's one changeling in their midst, it would have been more, and does point out that it seems like somebody used Jim to let Gunmar out. It wasn't specifically, Jim went into the Darklands alone of his own free will. No, he was tricked. He was manipulated into going in there. And this of course causes Blinky to realize that yes, Blinky's argument might actually hold water, and does proceed to point out that he will absolutely bring up the accusations to Usurna and bring up their evidence, and points out that Blinky has done well, and that he does appreciate how much work he's put in to try and save the Trollhunter. At which point he leaves to go do exactly what he just said, that he's going to meet with he goes to meet with Usurna, and explains what Blinky and the others found about how he suspects that there was a changeling living in their midst, and that there's a very good chance that Gunmar has other spies lurking around in Troll Market. And he proceeds to go on to explain how because of that, He suspects that there could be more than one, and that they'll need to do a careful search. And of course, Iserna hears all of this, and this is where the twist comes in, because this is something I've said about Iserna for a while now. That's how she's a little two-faced. Turns out that's quite literal, because in this episode, Iserna then proceeds to ask if anybody else knows about this, and Vendel of course points out that he's of course just trying to recover all their bases. But it's this one where Iserna points out that actually Vendel is wrong. At which point she pulls out a knife, and she proceeds to explain how there was only two traders among the troll market, being the changeling and his master. And when Vendel wonders how Iserna knows this, a look of confusion and a little bit of concern on his face, she explains that she's the master. At which point she stabs him, and he slowly turns to stone. And of course, she proceeds to gloat over Vendel, pointing out that now that he's dying, that he won't be, that it's unfortunate that he won't live to see Gunmar's return, and does proceed to calmly explain that once Gunmar is back, they'll be able to take over the world, and bring about the eternal night like Gunmar has been promising for the longest time. And of course, Vendel in his final moments does warn Iserna that she won't get away with this, and tries to say that the Trollhunter will stop her, but she interrupts, saying that the Trollhunter will die. At which point, Vendel completely turns to stone, and she pushes his statue over, so telling him goodbye and good riddance. At which point, the rest of the Troll Tribunal reconvenes, not realizing that Vendel is no longer among them. And this is and of course Jim, they point out that they've issued the ruling, and Jim does point out that Vendel isn't here and that they should wait for Vendel to come back. But they point out, and also pointing out that obviously Vendel was supposed to tell them all of the evidence that they found. And of course, not only does Iserna lie, claiming that Vendel told her no such thing, but she also continues to lie, telling them that Vendel actually said that the Trollhunter would do anything to protect his own skin, which Jim immediately knows is a lie. But since Vendel didn't quote unquote tell her any of the evidence, then that unfortunately they have no choice but to find Jim guilty, and Jim is ultimately sentenced to banishment within the Deep. And when wondering what exactly the Deep is, they explain that the Deep is a deep cavern in which no troll has ever returned, and nobody lies at the bottom, but that it holds unspeakable horrors. And sure enough, that's exactly what Jim is being forced to deal with. He is now being slowly moved toward the abyss. And they proceed to explain that, and Jim proceeds to try and reassure everybody with blinking, declaring that the whole trial is a farce. Of course, Toby tries to object, pointing out that Vendel being here is obviously an objection. Not being here is obviously an objection of some kind. But of course, Jim just reassures all of them, pointing out that it's not goodbye forever, and he will be back. He goes on to explain that he knows everybody's worried about that. He will continue to fight, and he will get back to them. But at which point, Iserna confronts Jim in his cage as he's about to be dropped down, and at which point she proceeds to not so subtly lay out her prejudices toward him, pointing out that that if it's any consolation, she considers his entire existence to be a violation of troll law because he's human. At which point they drop him into the depths, and of course it's at this point where Jim is submerged into the depths, and of course as established, the chain that's holding Jim breaks, but as established, the depths are exactly what they're established. They are pitch black, and Jim eventually has to summon his sword to see. But he winds up looking around, and yeah, it's completely pitch black in the depths. And of course, he's been sentenced to deal with his worst fear, which we don't fully find out what it is at this point. But he hears sinister laughter and starts hearing somebody moving around him. And when he looks around, he discovers someone else in Trollhunter armor, except it's the Eclipse armor. And of course, Jim just demands to know who they are. At which point, it's revealed that this evil version of Jim is quite literally a monster that has lost his humanity, which established that this is what Jim's fear is, losing himself. And sure enough, Jim is forced to fight his evil self, who is actually an evil troll version of himself, which is foreshadowing. We'll get to that. But ultimately, Jim is forced to fight back against his evil self, while Blinky tries to find Vendel and figure out what exactly went wrong. At which point he arrives in Vendel's workshop underneath the Heartstone, and does quickly discover what happened to Vendel. He comes into the workshop and sees Vendel's destroyed remains looking back at him, and upset that he's lost yet another friend. Vendel Blinky picks up Vendel's staff and cries for a bit. So yeah, this is a major loss, and it goes into the final episode of the season. So obviously, because he's the protagonist, Jim not dead, and there's obviously another season to go. But this episode established that Team Trollhunter lost. That's unfortunately how the episode ends. Just the team had their first real loss, and this of course it causes Jim to realize that there's going to be a lot more. But also, I should mention that the whole fight with Evil Jim is in fact foreshadowing for something later down the line. We'll explain that. But actually, if you've seen the series, you know exactly where that's going. But just pretend that you don't, and that you're watching this for the first time. I know some people are, some people aren't, so just pretend that you don't know what it is. I know where it's going. I've seen the entire franchise up through the movie, so I know exactly where this is going, but you won't. But yeah, and also, this is something I didn't mention when we first met Asurna, that there's some shady stuff going on with her, and now we know what it is. Asurna was evil the whole time, and when you look back at her past actions, paints that story a little bit. She wanted to bring Arg back down and use the salt from their home region to keep him alive for a nice long age. So you look into it a little bit more and realize that that's just going to prolong Arg's suffering. That is essentially how we are introduced to her character. And when you realize that, she was evil the whole time, that takes on a whole new sinister light. And then you realize that all the other actions that she's taken up until this point are also taken into a more sinister context. Case in point, her prosecuting the Trollhunter to discard their only protector. So yeah, it's not a noble thing. She just wants to get rid of the Trollhunter. So yeah. That's obviously been a big thing. That's obviously, and also, that also establishes that yes, she did know that Jim was coming out of the Darklands, and halted his escape the first time. She knew Jim was trying to escape. She knew it wasn't Gunmar. She just delayed that a little bit so that Gunmar could capture Jim, and eventually escape on his own. So yeah. Kind of establishes that that's been the entire arc that's been building for this past season. So kind of interesting. But but obviously for the time being, we now need to just kind of. So that this also establishes that Asurna is going to be a villain going forward. So in its argument, I just posed the argument that she's been a villain the entire time. But in case that is going to do it for today's review, though. So thank you guys so much for watching today's review. If you liked it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Join my Discord if you want to discuss other shows and other things. I have a special sub-channel for those if you want to do those and recommend some things. And discuss animation and other things that you think I would like. Please go check those out. Also be sure to go check out my Discord, my Patreon. It helps support me. I would appreciate that. Be sure to go check out my Twitch. I stream Saturdays and Sundays over there, as well as over here, so please go check those out. I would appreciate that as well. And also, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video, whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!